Let's explore how others' actions could cause our suffering. This morning's lesson is drawn from a good-hearted question found on Reddit, which begins, how to deal with suffering caused by other people, and then continues, when someone else causes me suffering, how is it in my power to end it? In line with the Four Noble Truths, I'm seriously struggling right now. And that's where the question ends. I am sorry you're struggling. I'm sorry that the troublemakers have found you. And I'd like to begin with broad brushstrokes. I feel that the answer to your question is in two parts. And the first part is going to be pertaining to the Four Noble Truths. Now, all complex animals on this planet have evolved to think symbolically. Therefore, it should come as very little surprise that figures of speech are found in every language. So, Sturgeon's law reminds us that 90% of everything sucks, and that 90% of folks traipsing around the countryside sincerely feel that being rigid, fearful, superstitious, controlling, elitist, cryptic, competitive, and cruel is Jim Dandy. But there's always going to be a minority who choose to be flexible, loving, rational, laid back, egalitarian, lucid, cooperative, and kind. But what has that to do with figures of speech? The majority, who are rigid, will look at a metaphor literally, and that will cause all sorts of problems. The minority, who are flexible and laid back and groovy, will recognize that there are always going to be figures of speech lurking about. Let's bring that knowledge. Let's view the Four Noble Truths through that lens of the possibility of figurative language. Although although we could read that life is stress or life is suffering, that's probably a metaphor for this. There are stressors. Some are circumstantial, some are physical, some are interpersonal, some are mental. The metaphoric statement, craving is its cause, is a metaphor for the following. We evolved survival mechanisms, primal drives to shove and reach and cling. Ask a biologist, they will tell you that what governs evolution is procreation. Natural selection chooses for things that support procreation. And then it's very cut and dry. We have copying errors that change our genetic code. That genetic code changes our subtly or coarsely. Those changes either make it easier to procreate or make it more difficult to even live long enough to procreate. If those changes make it easier to procreate, then those traits are passed on to the next generation. That's just how it works. So we have these drives that have been selected to keep us alive. Now, under our brain, we have two reward systems. One system is dopamine-oriented, and it rewards with pleasure. The other system is oxytocin oriented, and it rewards with sensations of fulfillment. The first rewards for anything that helps us to procreate or copulate, and the second system rewards for anything that helps us to cooperate. I like lining up the C's. Did you see what I did there? That's called an alliteration. Because I'm a word nerd. Anyway, everything is fine as long as our central nervous system is recognizing our survival instincts as tools. However, when those survival instincts begin acting like tyrants, we have a less fulfilling life. There's no punishment, there's no morality, that's just how it works. When our two reward systems are out of balance, we're going to experience less fulfillment. The liberation that the Buddha offers us is not liberation from the presence of our survival mechanisms, but from their tyranny. Their tyranny over our choices and our utterances and our deeds. Is a path leading to this liberation, and it's eightfold. The enlightenment the Buddha offers us is simply so mastering the eightfold path that we practice it spontaneously, habitually, easily, and effectively. So can other people be a source of stress? Yes. Yes, they can. Can our own survival instincts, when they become imbalanced, multiply that stress? Yes, they can. So there's two stressors here. The initial stress caused by dingbat dodo brains, and the exacerbation of that stress caused by an imbalanced relationship with our survival instincts. I feel that both can be dealt with using the eightfold path. So let's explore that right now. I'm a weird guy, and to me, the eightfold path makes most sense if we begin with the seventh bit, which is mindfulness, and the eighth bit, which is meditation. Now, over multiple centuries, a lot of confusion has seeped into Buddhism. I feel that confusion is most efficiently dispelled by looking at the Buddha's teachings through the lens of neuroscience. So let's do that right now. This is one of my favorite illustrations that I found on Google. It's a rather simplification of a cross-section of the human brain, this of course being the forehead, this being the back of the head. So before we understand mindfulness, what mindfulness and meditation are, is very, very, very useful to first understand what they are not according to neuroscience. Remember how I mentioned that according to Sturgeon's law, 90% of everything sucks, but not in the fun, tingly way? Well, that also applies to meditation teachers, and there are a bunch of lousy meditation teachers who will try to coerce their students into actively concentrating and actively analyzing, often with the best of motivations. But the only way to do either of those things is to rely on specific neurological mechanisms, such as our medial prefrontal cortex or our dorsolateral prefrontal cortex. Now, the prefrontal cortex overall is a splendid tool. Man, if you want to compare, contrast, sort, compute, calculate, edit, this is your boy. It's fabulous. But ask a performance coach, ask an athletic coach, and they will tell you, they don't care how strong you are. If you overtrain, first, you will experience the law of diminishing returns. Second, you can actually injure and even disable yourself. But how does that pertain to the front of our brain? Simple. According to fMRI studies, functional magnetic resonance imaging studies, when we overuse the prefrontal cortex, it is as if our amygdala activates. Our amygdala down here, this lumpy thing, is the seat of our aggression and our anxiety. I'm disabled, and when I have a ridiculous number of disabilities. One of them is ADHD, which means when I get a hyperfixation, I will just push myself insanely hard without knowing I'm pushing myself insanely hard. And if I start experiencing a spike in aggression that has nothing to do with my present circumstances, that's a big hint that it's time for me to have a rest. I need to grab a beverage and lay down and watch some YouTube videos of kitty cats and doggies being silly. It's time to rest. When I was younger and dumber, I was the lord of bro science. And when I would work out, I would feel the pain, but I'd push through it and eventually injured my tendons. I incurred an injury close to 30 years ago and I'm still not 100% better from. So I can tell you from firsthand experience that if we ignore the primary symptoms of overtraining, there are consequences. In our brain, if we consistently exhaust our prefrontal cortex, we could begin presenting with symptoms of depression, and you don't want that. No one turns to meditation and because they say, I'm really feeling a deficiency of rage, terror, and despair, so I'm going to abuse my brain. No one does that. But people do abuse the brain with the best of intentions. But here's the good news. There are other parts of our brain that are optimized for mindfulness and meditation. And let's explore how they work. Every time we inhale, whether we know it or not, we are wired to access our sympathetic nervous system located in the middle third of our spinal cord. That's why I use the phrase central nervous system and not just brain. So I was really astonished to learn about this myself. So this bad boy has evolved to help us to perceive in a very special way, to help us to perceive vulnerably, passively, viscerally, and randomly. So we talked about yang being rigid, and the seat of that rigidity is most likely the team of our prefrontal cortex and our amygdala. On the other hand, we read about being flexible, loving, laid back, egalitarian, lucid, cooperative, and kind. And the seat of that is most likely the team of our autonomic nervous system and our anterior cingulate gyrus, which we'll get to in just a few minutes. So, the middle third of our spinal cord, the sympathetic nervous system, is wired to help us perceive vulnerably, passively, viscerally, and randomly. Now, there's a little bit of gray area here, and here's how it works. We're wired to notice a shit ton of phenomena. We are wired to notice sights, sounds, sensations, flavors, scents, and the like. We are wired to notice emotions, intentions, thoughts, memories, and imaginings. This can get overwhelming. Fortunately, nature has given us a solution to that. Every time we exhale, whether we know it or not, we are wired to access our parasympathetic nervous system, ensconced within both the lower third and the upper third of that same spinal cord. This bad boy has evolved to support both physical relaxation as well as mental release. Well, if that's the case, then why aren't we all enlightened? And why do we gotta sit cross-legged on the floor? Simple. In a word, Urkel. Urkel was clever and good-hearted, but klutzy as hell, wasn't he? Well, our brain is as cluttered as the storage unit of a hoarder. And it's just a three-ring shit show. But here's the wild thing. Our brain can respond to simple suggestions. When we silently, mentally, and passively recite the demonstrative pronoun this during our inhalation, our brain can't help but begin cooperating with our sympathetic nervous system. Additionally, when we silently, mentally, and passively recite the one-syllable verb ease, and we do that during our exhalation, our brain cannot help but begin cooperating with our parasympathetic nervous system. This is why we sit and meditate for at least 5 minutes every 12 hours or so. Well, this is all well and good, but how's the heck going to help us deal with the shitheads, the troublemakers, who can make our life into a living hell? Simple. Remember how we talked about how the more we overuse our prefrontal cortex, the more our aggressive and anxious amygdala lights up? But check this out. The more we play, the more we dance with our sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system in harmony with our inhalation and exhalation, the more our amygdala calms down, or as Samuel L. Jackson, having trouble with my tongue, might say, calms the fuck down. But there's more. The more we work with our sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous systems, the more this hunk of meat gets activated. This hunk of meat that kind of looks like a baseball mitt. Catcher's mitt? Is that it? A catcher's mitt. The big kids call it the anterior cingulate gyrus. It functions as the hub of our mirror neurons, the seat of empathy and compassion and cooperation. This is why the greatest Dzogchen Lamas of Tibet have insisted that the highest love is spontaneous and uncontrived. So, practicing mindfulness and meditation helps us to let go of the anger and fear we might feel towards the troublemakers in our life. But wait, there's more. The more we practice mindfulness and meditation, the more our choices, utterances, and deeds flow with the effortless effort of love's centered spontaneity. This is the secret sauce. When our choices, utterances, and deeds flow not from scattered spontaneity, but from centered spontaneity, we are able to sidestep more and more of the troubles caused by fools. When someone wants to change, change can happen and is often very difficult. If someone doesn't want to change, striving to coerce them to change kind of reminds me of the old saw I heard from a gal from Arkansas. Let me know if you've heard this one. Don't try to teach a pig to sing. It'll waste your time and annoy the pig. If we try to coerce others to do the right thing, guess what? We leave the path of being flexible and laid back and enter the path or indulge the tendencies to be rigid and controlling. Was it Goethe or was it Nietzsche who said, and I paraphrase, those who would hunt monsters run the risk of becoming monsters? But by being men and women who regularly train in perception and release, we sidestep that trap. And our choices, utterances, and deeds flow in harmony. Some might call that the Tao, some might call that the zone, some might call that the flow. I call it effortless effort, or the zenith of the sixth fold of the Buddha's eightfold path. Effortless effort, which some could see as a blending of the fourth and third enlightenment factors. Now, in summary, 50% of the Buddha's eightfold path pertains to loving kindness. And that loving kindness can flow from centered spontaneity because of our mindfulness and meditation. Originally, there was no code of conduct. The Buddha simply taught kindness. What is the essence of circumstantial morality? Kind commerce. Not being a Karen, trying to get people fired, not being a Chad, trying to drive other concerns of business. Instead, replacing competition and cruelty with cooperation and kindness. What is the key to behavioral morality? The non-violence of physical kindness. The great Tibetan Saint Karma Jigme Rinpoche said that the essence of the Pratimoksha vows is simply non-violence. What is the essence of interpersonal morality? Kind communication. What is the essence of mental morality? Kind intention. And all these things are the spontaneous propitiation, the spontaneous flow of love's centered spontaneity. Lastly, impermanence does not require a PhD. In the second to the final passage, the penultimate passage of the Satipatthana Sutta, the Buddha explains that one can master the path in less than 7 years, or 7 quarters, or 7 months, or 7 fortnights, or 7 weeks, or even 7 days. You can't get a PhD in 7 days. But what you can do is practice mindfulness. And whether you want to or not, actually, you can't even help but notice change. Sometimes subtle, sometimes coarse, sometimes gentle, sometimes jarring, sometimes glacial, sometimes lightning fast. But change becomes something you can't help but notice. We cannot help but notice, but seeing changes and hearing changes and feeling changes and tasting changes and smelling changes. Especially if you're fond of lentils. We cannot help but sense, perceive changes in our emotions and intentions and thoughts. We recall different things from moment to moment. We imagine different things from moment to moment. This constant change is not an obstacle. It's just part of life. Being vulnerable to that and relaxing into that is one of the keys to coping with the slings and arrows of nudniks. With the slings and arrows of shedheads who come into our life like a Teflon-coated wrecking ball. I do look forward to practicing this with you, together as a team, after approximately 30 seconds of housekeeping. This is Lama Jigme Gyatso of the Buddha Joy Meditation School. For more than 30 years, I spent about 8 hours a day, almost every day, studying, practicing, mastering, and reverse engineering the teachings and techniques of each sect of Buddhism so that you would not have to. Welcome, my friends, to meditate like a Jedi, which is made possible due to the generosity of viewers just like you. Now, if I'm clever, I will push the right button, but that's a big if. So let us play with the latest iteration of love, mindfulness meditation, and the 3 marks of reality. Kind of sounds like a Motown group from the early 60s, doesn't it? Together as a team, let us begin by setting intention through chanting love and letting go's wishes for universal enlightenment and well-being. Please chant with me. Now, this chanting, by the way, is not prayer. We're not supplicating a real or imagined celestial entity to lavish us with blessings. We are simply using words to guide our own intention. May all circumstances of all beings appearing yet impermanent be as safe and abundant as a real or imagined Buddha's land. May all minds of all beings clear yet impermanent be as joyfully enlightened as a Buddha's mind. May all relationships of all beings resounding yet impermanent be as peacefully loving as a Buddha's speech. May all bodies of all beings sensual yet impermanent be as beautifully healthy as a real or imagined Buddha's form. So that should be subtly stimulating, so we have some energy to gut through our training. Let us bring the circumstantial into the path of love, mindfulness, meditation, and the 3 marks of existence. Please, we're going to begin by bringing the circumstantial into the path of dukkha. Each of us has experienced the stress of not getting our circumstantial needs met, how we want, when we want, for as long as we want, if at all. So we're going to take all these words and compress them down into just 6 syllables that we're going to divide between our inhalation and our exhalation, remembering that this question is rhetorical. We are now bringing our circumstances into the path of metta. Since we are not alone in our frustrations, we could also long that other circumstantial needs also be met. Remember, we are already wired to do this thanks to our anterior cingulate gyrus. Boon is a monosyllabic synonym for good fortune. Lots is a monosyllabic synonym for circumstance. Now let's bring the circumstantial into the path of anika. Observing the coming and going of circumstantial phenomena, help us to see that ever-changing one and all there is nothing permanent to grasp. Let us conclude this quarter by bringing the circumstantial into the path of anatta. As we relax into our exhalation, whatever circumstantial phenomena we noticed during our previous inhalation could feel less like our identity, as if it simply did not define us. Let us bring whatever we spontaneously notice into the path of awareness and release. Allow me to refresh your memory of how to do this. As we silently, mentally, and passively recite the demonstrative pronoun this during our inhalation, we can vulnerably, passively, viscerally, and randomly watch the antics of mind as it perceives, emotes, intends, reasons, recalls, and imagines. As we silently, mentally, and passively recite the one-syllable verb ease, during our exhalation, we can relax into mind's non-graspable nature. Pardon me. Let's continue. Now let us bring the mental into the path of love, mindfulness meditation, and the 3 marks of existence. Beginning with dukkha stress. Each of us has experienced the stress of not getting our mental needs met, how we want when we want for as long as we want, if at all. Let us bring the mental into the path of metta. Since we are not alone in our frustrations, we could also long let others' mental needs also be met. And now for a bit of the old Anika. Observing the coming and going of mental phenomena, help us to see that ever-changing one and all, there is nothing permanent to grasp. So we're going to take all these words and compress them down into just 6 syllables, which we're going to divide between our inhalation and our exhalation. Of course, do bear in mind that this question is purely rhetorical. We turn our attention and we bring the mental into the path of anatta. As we relax into our exhalation, whatever mental phenomena we noticed during our previous inhalation could feel less like our identity, as if it simply did not define us. And now let us, as we silently and mentally and passively recite the demonstrative pronoun this during our inhalation, we could vulnerably, passively, viscerally, and randomly watch the antics of mind as it perceives, emotes, intends, reasons, recalls, and imagines. As we silently, mentally, and passively recite the 1-syllable verb ease during our exhalation, we could relax into mind's non-graspable nature. Let us bring the interpersonal into the path of love, mindfulness, meditation, and the 3 marks of reality. Beginning with dukkha, stress. Each of us has experienced the stress of not getting our interpersonal needs met, how we want, when we want, if at all. Since we are not alone in our frustrations, we could also long that others' interpersonal needs also be met. Let us now bring our experience of the interpersonal into the path of anicca impermanence. Together, observing the coming and going of interpersonal phenomena, help us to hear how ever-changing one and all there is nothing permanent to grasp. So we're going to take all these words and compress them down into just 6 syllables that we're going to divide between our inhalation and our exhalation over the next few breaths. Please remember that this question is purely rhetorical. Now let us bring the whoopsie. Now let us bring the interpersonal into the path of anatta. As we relax into our exhalation, whatever interpersonal phenomena we noticed during our previous inhalation could feel less like our identity, as if it simply did not define us. Let us bring whatever we spontaneously notice into the path of awareness and release. As silently, mentally, and passively we recite the demonstrative pronoun this during our inhalation, we could vulnerably, passively, viscerally, and randomly watch the antics of mind as it perceives, emotes, intends, reasons, recalls, and imagines. As silently, mentally, and passively we recite the one-syllable verb ease during our exhalation, we could relax into mind's non-graspable nature. We come now to the final quarter of this morning's practice, where we bring the physical into the path of love, mindfulness, meditation, and the three marks of existence. Let us begin by bringing the physical into the path of dukkha. Each of us has experienced the stress of not getting all physical needs met, how we want when we want for as long as we want if at all. Since we are not alone in our frustrations, we could also long that others' physical needs also be met. Feeling the coming and going of physical phenomena, help us to feel that ever-changing one and all, there is nothing permanent to grasp. As we relax into our exhalation, whatever physical phenomena we noticed during our previous inhalation could feel less like our identity, as if it simply did not define us. Let us seal this morning's practice by chanting loving wishes for universal enlightenment and well-being. May all circumstances of all beings appearing yet impermanent be as safe and abundant as a real or imagined Buddha's land. May all minds of all being clear yet impermanent be as joyfully enlightened as our Buddha's mind. May all relationships of all beings resounding yet impermanent be as peacefully loving as a Buddha's speech. May all bodies of all beings sensual yet impermanent be as beautifully healthy as a real or imagined Buddha's form. If you feel that I have earned it, you could give this live stream a thumbs up. You could even help support this channel. In approximately 10¼ hours, I would very much like to return to lead today's evening meditation class and group practice. And if you are as geeky as me, may the Force be with you always.